snacks at Christmas dinner, mocking her as a senile old woman. I was the only one who didn't join in the laughter. My dad sneered, "It's fake. Don't be an idiot," before ripping his copy into shreds. To keep the peace, I silently tucked my check into my purse. They all thought it was a pathetic joke from a woman slipping into dementia. But the next morning, when I walked into Meadowbrook National Bank, the atmosphere completely shattered. The bank manager's face went entirely pale the moment he scanned the paper. He hurriedly locked his office door, pulled me aside with trembling hands, and whispered, "Ma'am, we need to talk. Your life is in immediate danger, and your family has just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Follow my story until the end to see how far it reaches." My name is Nora, and at 29 years old, I had long accepted my role as the invisible ghost at my family's dinner table. While my parents and siblings spent their lives chasing status symbols, luxury cars, and the shallow approval of high society, I chose a quiet career as a digital archivist. To them, my passion for preserving history was a useless hobby that didn't bring in real money. But my lack of corporate ambition made me an outcast in my own bloodline, a disappointment to a family that measured human worth strictly by the balance in a bank account. The only person who truly saw me was Grandma Evelyn. For the past year, however, my family had stopped treating her like a beloved matriarch and started treating her like an inconvenient financial burden. They assumed her modest suburban home and fading wardrobe meant she was completely broke. As the holiday season approached, the group chats weren't filled with Christmas cheer. They were filled with bitter complaints about who would have to take care of her next and cold calculations on how to quietly divide her remaining minimal assets. I sat silently through those discussions, my stomach churning at their naked greed. When Christmas dinner finally arrived, the tension in the dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. My father was already poured into his third glass of scotch, aggressively holding court about his latest business ventures, while Grandma Evelyn sat quietly at the edge of the table, calmly observing the sharks circling her. The heavy silver clattered against the porcelain as the main course ended, and Grandma Evelyn cleared her throat, drawing every eye to her. With slow, deliberate movements, she reached into her vintage leather purse and pulled out a stack of crisp, custom white envelopes. One by one, she passed them down the long table until everyone held one. Inside each envelope was a single piece of paper, a certified check made out to each of us for exactly $5 million. For a fleeting second, the room was dead silent. Then, the collective illusion broke, and the dining room erupted into a wave of cruel, mocking laughter. My father didn't even hesitate. He sneered the words with utter contempt. "It's fake. Don't be an idiot." Before Grandma could even speak, his hands clamped down on the paper, violently ripping his copy into tiny shreds and tossing them into his half-empty gravy boat. My siblings quickly followed his lead, cackling as they tore their own checks apart and threw them into the trash bin like worthless junk, mocking her for what they believed was a pathetic delusion of grandeur brought on by dementia. The disrespect was sickening, but to keep the peace and shield Grandma from further humiliation, I quietly folded my check intact and tucked it deep inside my purse. They all thought she was a senile old woman playing a sad joke. They had no idea they had just sealed their own financial doom. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when I pulled into the parking lot of Meadowbrook National Bank. I hadn't slept a wink. My mind was spinning, and truth be told, I fully expected the teller to look at me with pity, confirming that my sweet grandmother had indeed succumbed to a sad, late-stage delusion. I just wanted to verify the check quietly so I could figure out how to best comfort her. When I stepped inside, the bank was dead quiet. I walked up to the counter and handed the check to the teller, who took one look at the routing numbers and immediately went stiff. Within 30 seconds, the branch manager hurried out of his office, his eyes wide and his breathing shallow. The moment his scanner verified the unique tracking sequence on the paper, the casual politeness drained from his face, leaving him entirely pale. He didn't say a word to the rest of the staff. He quickly guided me into his private room, shut the door, and turned the heavy brass lock. When he turned back to me, his hands were visibly trembling as he held the paper. He pulled me aside, leaning in close and whispered the chilling words, "Ma'am, we need to talk." He took a deep breath and looked straight into my eyes. "Your grandmother is not a penniless old woman, Nora. She's a massive real estate conglomerate. This $5 million check is 100% valid, fully backed, and liquid. But your life is now in immediate danger." The branch manager leaned over the desk, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper as he explained the terrifying legal reality behind Grandma Evelyn's immense wealth. These $5 million checks weren't just simple holiday gifts or tokens of affection. They were a highly calculated, legally binding character test explicitly designed by her corporate lawyers with a strict poison pill clause. Evelyn had known for years that her children were circling her like vultures, waiting for her to pass away so they could strip her assets clean. This setup was her ultimate trap. By physically tearing up, mocking, and rejecting those certified checks at the dinner table, my father and siblings hadn't just thrown away paper. In the eyes of the law, their destructive actions constituted a formal, permanent rejection of the family trust. The moment those unique tracking numbers were flagged as physically destroyed without being processed, it automatically triggered a massive fraud and security notification directly to the bank's elite compliance division. The manager looked at me with a mixture of awe and absolute dread before dropping the final bombshell. Because I had chosen to stay quiet, defy the family pressure, and keep my check completely intact, I was now officially recorded as the sole remaining eligible heir and the exclusive executor of Evelyn's multi-million-dollar estate. "You are now walking out of here as one of the wealthiest women in this city, Nora," he warned grimly. "But your greedy family is about to find out they are completely ruined, and when they realize you hold the entire fortune, you'll have a massive target on your back." By noon that very day, the legal shockwave hit my family. Because the automated fraud and security protocols had been triggered by the destruction of the checks, Grandma Evelyn's corporate attorneys moved with terrifying efficiency, instantly freezing every single joint account, credit line, and allowance tied to the family trust. The sudden, brutal cutoff plunged my parents and siblings into immediate financial gridlock, and it didn't take long for the truth to leak out from the bank's corporate office. Suddenly, my phone exploded with a frantic, nonstop barrage of chaotic calls and messages from my father and siblings. The tone of their voices shifted wildly in real time, going from aggressive, screaming demands for answers to synthetic, desperate pleading the moment they realized I was the one sitting in the manager's office. "Nora, please, you have to tell us what's happening," my father begged, his usual arrogance completely shattered. Back at my parents' house, a scene of pure, pathetic desperation was unfolding. My siblings were frantically on their hands and knees, tearing through the trash bins and dumping out the contents of the greasy gravy boat, trying to piece together the shredded, stained remnants of their $5 million checks like absolute fools. They desperately believed that if they could just scotch tape the papers back together, the bank would accept them. They were completely unaware that their public mockery had already legally sealed their fate, and the strict, automated deadline to deposit those certified documents had already passed forever. The mahogany doors of the formal boardroom slammed shut, cementing the final confrontation. My family marched in with an air of unearned confidence, confidently tossing a plastic bag filled with stained, taped-together check fragments onto the polished table before the estate lawyers. My father slammed his fist down, furiously screaming that Grandma Evelyn had intentionally defrauded them with a cruel, unstable stunt and demanding their frozen accounts be reinstated immediately. They still thought they could bully their way into millions. But the lead attorney didn't even flinch. With absolute, icy calm, he presented the ironclad legal stipulations of the final trust agreement. He looked my father dead in the eye and explained that their public mockery, verbal rejection, and physical destruction of the certified documents, captured completely by the bank's automated compliance division, had permanently and irreversibly disqualified them from the inheritance. The taped-together paper was nothing but worthless garbage. The color instantly drained from my siblings' faces as the brutal reality of the legal hammer finally crashed down on them. While they sat there completely paralyzed by shock, the attorney quietly slid the official executorship and inheritance transfer documents across the table toward me. I picked up the pen without a single shred of hesitation and signed my name on the dotted line. With that single stroke of a pen, the power dynamic permanently flipped. I walked away with the entirety of Evelyn's empire, leaving my greedy, abusive family with absolutely nothing but the crushing debts they had foolishly accumulated while anticipating a fake victory. 3 months after that fateful boardroom showdown, the dust finally settled, and I used a fraction of my inheritance to buy a beautiful, historic estate where Grandma Evelyn could live out her remaining days in absolute peace, surrounded by the dignity she always deserved. The rest of the fortune was transferred into the newly established Evelyn Legacy Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to protecting vulnerable elderly individuals from financial exploitation and familial abuse. It was the perfect tribute to her strength. Now, I'm incredibly curious about all of you who have listened to my story until the very end. What would you have done if you were in my exact shoes at that chaotic Christmas dinner table? Would you have had the courage to quietly save your check? Or would you have given in to the immense family pressure to destroy from so I can see exactly how far my story has reached? Meanwhile, I am leaving 2 other incredible, and I promise they will definitely surprise you.